Kirsty and the narrowboat. As Jordan was away, Kirsty had to do his work. She worked hard, but couldn't manage all of it on her own, so the new controller bought a new engine to help her. His name was Edwin, a fairly strong tank engine whose design was similar to Tom's. He had 4 driving wheels and 4 training wheels. Originally, he was bought to work on for the Fat Controller, but because of Jordan's incident, he had agreed to have him transferred to the Oakham Road Railway. Running alongside the passenger line for 2 miles, there was a canal, and each day Kirsty saw very thin boats travelling up and down. "They're narrowboats," explained her driver. "A long time ago, they were used for transporting freight and coal to ports and towns. Nowadays, they're used for holidays." "I don't see how anyone would want to spend their holidays on boats like that," Kirsty said, a little unconvinced. "Lots of people do," laughed her driver. Kirsty told the other engines that night. "I've heard about these narrowboats," Tom said. "In the old days, they were pulled alongside the bank by horses, but they were later built with motors. And one reason you don't see very much of them carrying freight was because of the railways," added Edwin. "People at the time believed we were faster and more efficient than they were." But Kirsty was still confused. But why would people want to have holidays on narrowboats? "Peace and quiet, perhaps," replied Edwin. "They're renowned for that sort of quality." A few days later, Kirsty was puffing past the canal when she saw a group of girls near a narrowboat. "They're a local brownie group," explained her driver. "My sister's niece is part of their group as a leader. By the looks of it, they're taking a day trip on that narrowboat." They reached the end of the line in good time, and while they waited for James's train, Kirsty went over to the work siding to see Jordan. She found him standing on one of the sidings between some tarpaulin-covered trucks. As there wasn't much space due to other engines under repair, Jordan had to spend his time under a sheet outside, but under a roof of an old carriage shed. Kirsty came up alongside. "Hello, Jordan. How are you feeling?" she asked. "Lousy," Jordan smiled tiredly. "But at least they're treating me well here. Some of the Fat Controller's engines come by to say hello and give their sympathy." "Well, that's good to know," smiled Kirsty. "Trouble is that my new parts are taking so long to come," Jordan huffed. "I guess it's hard to find spare parts for engines like us, so they're probably going to have to make me ones from scratch." Kirsty wanted to say something else, but there was a whistle from the platform as James arrived with the stopping train from the main line. Kirsty said goodbye to Jordan and went back to her train. Kirsty was still deep in thought about Jordan, but as she approached the canal, her driver saw a young girl in a yellow and brown brownie uniform waving a red flag. "Whoa, Kirsty!" called her driver. "Something must be wrong." She brought Kirsty to a stop, and the brownie came up to her cab. "Something wrong?" the driver asked. "Our narrowboat's been bogged down by mud," replied the brownie, "and our horse has broken loose. Can you help us get to the next lock, please?" "We'll see what we can do," replied the driver. So the guard went back to the nearest signal box and told the signalman what was happening. A short while later, Edwin came to take Kirsty's train on, and Kirsty made her way over to the spot of the stranded narrowboat. She saw some of the brownies trying to get what they could away from the narrowboat to get unstuck. "Don't worry," called Kirsty. "Help is at hand." Kirsty's driver got out a chain from Kirsty's toolbox and hooked one end to Kirsty's front coupling hook. She then scrambled down the embankment and, with the help of the brownie leader, hooked it up to the front of the narrowboat. "Right, Kirsty, she said as she clambered back into her cab. "Gently does it." Kirsty slowly and carefully pulled on the chain, and the narrowboat slowly came off the mud. The brownies cheered as their boat came free. "Right then," said the driver, "let's get this lot back to the lock." So Kirsty, slowly and carefully, pulled the narrowboat all the way to the lock, where the lockkeeper was waiting, with a horse standing beside him. "I believe this horse belongs to you," he said. "Found him eating grass from my lawn." The leader apologized for the incident and thanked Kirsty and their crew for their help. That night, the new controller came to see Kirsty with a letter from the brownie group. "They told me all about what had happened," he said, "and I've been asked to present you with this plaque for being a great help to the brownie group." "Oh, thank you, sir," smiled Kirsty. "Looks like the brownies had taken a liking to you," smiled Tom. "Yes," smiled Kirsty, "and to me, they seem to understand just what an engine needs." And as she fell asleep, she thought to herself, "I think I may understand why narrowboats are so popular now."